In this video, we're going to walk through which baby products to avoid to improve developmental outcomes for your child. Hey, it's Morgan here with Passable Parent, where we help you improve developmental outcomes for your child and find the joy in parenting. I've been a pediatric nurse for the past 10 years, specializing in early childhood development. I'm also a new mom. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really appreciate your support, and I don't want you to miss out on any of our new content. All right, let's get started. Joining us today, we have Linda. She is a registered nurse for the past 35 plus years and works in early intervention. If you don't know what early intervention is, it's actually working with children from birth to 3 and enhancing their development. Linda's going to go over with us today the top baby products you should avoid to better enhance your child's development.
Hi everybody. So looking at infant development, the first thing I think that's heavily marketed are those walkers. So, they have them on wheels and they really push that they help your child walk, but they don't. They're very nice for your child to be in a vertical position, for social engagement, when you need to put them somewhere to get, if you're cooking, wash, when you're taking a bath, but you want to make sure that you get an extra saucer. You don't want to get the type of walker that has the wheels on the bottom. They're really dangerous, especially if you have steps. Lots and lots of injuries from that with children falling down the steps on them. So kids can move in them, but they don't help them prepare to walk. The walkers actually have you lean forward and you're kind of paddling with your feet. You're not really putting any weight on your legs or developing those muscles that you need for walking. The best place for your baby to be is on the floor. Of course, with supervision, you want to make sure that floor time is the most important gift that you can give to your baby. Bouncers, same thing. If you're going to use it for a little bit of social engagement, your baby's vertical, very nice. I know that, families like them when they're eating, you just got to be careful. Think about setting a timer. You want to put a limit on how long you're in that bouncer. 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That goes really fast. You turn around and it's like, oh my gosh, my baby's been in there for an hour. If you set the timer, then you'll know and you'll avoid that pitfall of your child being in that bouncer or being in that walker for extended periods of time. Being on the floor is the best place for your baby to be. Give them development. If you have a hardwood floor, there's lots of mats out there for sale, and I'm sure in future segments, Nurse Morgan will be showing you different products that really enhance your baby's development.
And Linda, I think it's also really important to tell parents about how the foot placement of their baby is different when they're using devices such as bouncers or walkers. Could you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, you really want to make sure that if you're going to use that device, and again, it's a social position, they're up vertical, they have nice vision for, being able to be social, and it's limited time, but if you are going to use it, make sure that their feet that they're not on their tippy toes. So, if you need to put a book under there, you can put some, a blanket and then a book on top of it. But if you're going to use that device, and again, just for very limited times, you want to make sure that their feet are flat on whatever you can put under that device.
Mm-hmm. But you also want to be careful that they're not going to topple forward out of the device. So it's definitely a balancing act, but you don't want your baby in a position for a prolonged period of time where their feet are pointed downwards. They never learn something called flexion and extension, which is when you lift your foot up and you put your foot down. And you need to be able to do this in order to learn how to walk. So this is a very, very important thing to remember when using these devices. They do hinder the movement of the foot in those positions.
And really the best place for your baby to be is on the floor. That's where they're going to learn and develop all the muscles that they need for walking. The best place, the fastest, the earliest that your child's going to walk is the more time that you can have them spend on the floor.
Yes, Linda, floor time is one of the number one things that you want to be doing with your baby. Of course, that needs to be supervised, but it helps your baby learn spatial awareness. It helps them figure out their surroundings, how to move their bodies. It's the number one thing that your pediatrician will tell you to do, your nurse, whoever your trusted medical advisor is. And again, talk with them if you have any questions, but floor time is number one. And that brings us to the topic of swings. I know those are a hot item that I see a lot of parents purchasing, but it's also one of the items we're going to tell you to avoid or to at least limit and use in moderation. Linda, can you tell us a little bit about why we want to limit time in the swings?
So again, with the swing, it's a nice position if you need to do something, but again, think about how much time your baby's spending in that piece of equipment. If they're in that piece of equipment, they're not on the floor working on the muscles that they need to develop to be able to roll and then crawl and then pull to stand and then walk. So the swing is very nice. It can soothe the baby. Be really careful. Don't prop a bottle when the baby's in a swing. That's very, very dangerous for babies to have that. But having them in the swing is, again, it can be a nice position for them. You need to be careful if they're in there that they're not always with their head turned to one side or the other. You can get your head flat on whatever side it is that they're choosing to be on most often. So when they're in that swing, try and make sure that they're sitting, that they're midline in it, and that you're avoiding how long they're sitting in the swing and swinging.
That's a really good point, Linda, that I don't think we previously mentioned, but is another reason why that floor time is so crucial and important. It builds the muscles in your neck and your back, and it also helps your head from being flat or developing soft spots. So those soft spots and those flat spots can occur if you are in a seated position with your head up against something like one of these swings, or there's different devices that I love, like the Mamaroo, which is really great in the beginning for newborns, and I highly recommend it. But again, it's using that device in moderation. That is something that they shouldn't be in for a prolonged period of time because of the fact that they're not on the ground, they're not learning how to move their bodies during that time. So great tool, but again, something you want to use in moderation. And that also goes along with the swings. And all of these devices, of course, should be used with parental supervision. It's not something that you should be putting your baby into sleep at night. You need to be supervising your baby while they're sleeping in these devices or while they're sitting in these devices. But again, definitely something that you have to be careful for another reason, which is the shape of your baby's head could be affected if they spend too much time in these devices.
And move those if they're going to be in it, especially when they're infants. Think about if they're in a swing that their head's not always the same way. If you're putting them in any of the devices that rock you or hold you, you want to change the position of that device so that when the baby's looking at you or looking at something of interest, that their head is turning both ways, because just like Nurse Morgan said, you can develop flatness on your head when you're in a seated device, because babies are still most of the time they're still reclined in that seated device and there's pressure on your head.
And that brings us to our next item to avoid. The next item is a pacifier. Now, this is something that a lot of parents really need. They really use it. They love it. They have a good experience with using the pacifier. But this is something that we're going to recommend you avoid or use in moderation with your baby. So if you're going to be using a pacifier, I think that it can be used as a soothing technique. You need to keep in mind that your baby could be trying to tell you something. They could be hungry. They could be wanting to suckle for comfort, but they also could be hungry. So it's important to read their hunger cues. And Linda, would you like to touch a little bit on why pacifiers should be used in moderation?
So as you're developing, you need to think about that we make sounds when we don't have something in our mouth. So if your child, you're making sounds at 6 months old, if that pacifier is in your mouth and you're 5 months old, you're 6 months old, you're not making sounds, you're suckling instead of using your tongue to play and make sounds with. Our pre-language activities for your tongue muscles and your lips and the movement that you make when your mouth doesn't have something in it is all movement that prepares you for speech development. So think about if you had something in your mouth all the time and you're not making sounds, you're not talking. And babies, we really want to encourage them to get that sound production going. Babies are really interested in your face. They want to do that face-to-face play with you. They're really interested in the sounds you're making, and they're making lots of sounds. A 6-month-old is making fun sounds. Pacifiers in their mouth, when they're awake and alert and during playtime, they're not making sounds.
So again, to recap, A couple items that you definitely want to avoid or use in moderation with your baby are swings, walkers, bouncers, and pacifiers. All these things can be useful tools, but they also should be used in moderation and with parental supervision. And the number one thing that you can do instead of using some of these items that can help your baby with their development is floor time. Getting that floor time, letting your baby have unrestricted time on the floor, supervised with an adult present, to learn how to move their bodies, strengthen their neck, strengthen their muscles. It all builds on itself in childhood development. You learn to crawl before you learn to stand, before you learn to walk. They're all building blocks, and it all starts with that floor time, that tummy time. And these are all topics that I'm going to touch on with you in videos to come. So do not forget to like and subscribe so you can follow along and learn tips and tricks that will help you with these different developmental stages and to improve outcomes for your child. Thank you so much for joining us, Linda. We really appreciate it, and we'll be using you for future videos to come and all of your wonderful expertise that you have to share with all of our followers.
Thanks, Nurse Morgan.